Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. We are continuing the Fawlty Towers reviews. We're now on to episode 4 of the second season, and it is a title that just jumps out at you, and you instantly know what the episode is about: the Kipper and the corpse. Now, this is one of those ideas that you know would be funny, but you got to do it right, or else the censors are going to go, nope, 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 nope. Especially with John Cleese involved. I mean, just look at what they had to do in order to get one of my favorite little Monty Python sketches is The Undertaker to air. They had to add that thing at the end where people rush the stage. They're so disgusted with the dark humor, which is funny, but I think kind of ruins the impact of the joke. Here, involving a dead body in a hotel, you got to be very, very sensitive. And I think that for the most part, the episode does handle it pretty well. That most of the humor is drawn from the absurdity of our main characters, how they're reacting to it, and how they're trying to hide it from the other guests, even though, in all honesty, when a dead body like that happens, you're supposed to leave it in the room. You're not supposed to move it so other people can move in. You're not supposed to hide it like this. You're supposed to leave it in place. And no, I'm not saying that from experience from finding one, because thankfully, I haven't yet. Which, the longer I'm in this line of work, is subject to change, just like a wrestling card, but as of right now, no. Now, in the 1999 interview, Cleese stated that he got the idea for this episode after he asked the manager of the Savoy what his worst issue was, and of course, finding a dead body and dealing with guests that have died is the obvious one. And because of that, they named the character who they find dead Mr. Lehman in his honor. Kind of a slightly morbid way to honor someone, but that's Cleese's dark sense of humor, and I'm all for it. Now, the plot of the episode is it seems like it's an average day at Fawlty Towers. Guests coming in, guests going out, Basil being his usual self, Polly and Manuel doing their usual shtick, some other unpleasant guests like the one lady with the dog, which, based on some of the stuff that happened there, at least here, I don't know if the things are different in Britain in the 70s or it's because they mentioned she paid extra, but I'd say the moment that a dog bites one person, that dog is out. And if it bites a second person, that guest is out. But given how Basil is with the money and all that, that's why they're not doing that. But it's one of those things like, I'm not usually for animal abuse, but giving that dog the sausages with hot sauce, as George Lopez would say, so that way you learn. So that way you learn. Well, we skip ahead to the next morning after a guest is checked in. He's going to have breakfast in bed. Basil is already a little upset about this, so he's his little passive-aggressive self. But he takes the breakfast upstairs. Before he does, he's all moaning about the kippers that they ordered, which, hence the title. He thinks that they're expired, that they're bad. It's like, he's all going like, you know that the law says we're not supposed to serve them like this. They're good, Basil. All right, all right. Takes him upstairs, starts sending the breakfast down, starts going around, fixing the parts of the room while talking to the guest without the guest saying anything, because the guest is already dead. And this is where that one rant that Basil gives about striking workers is like, they get the money and they go on strike. It's called socialism. I think Cleese probably knows really what socialism is, but I think he wrote that intentionally so Basil could seem like he's using words without realizing what they mean. Because last I checked, workers striking was not socialism. Or if it is, or if someone's going to call it that, it's a very, very broad definition of socialism. But it fits totally with how Basil is as a conservative-leaning character. And it's very funny that he's very oblivious that this guy isn't dead. And he doesn't even catch on after he tries getting the guy to say something, which is a continuation from their interaction the previous night. It's only when Polly has to take milk up to him that they realize this man is dead. And Basil's initial reaction is like, "The Kippers! The Kippers!" And he tries to hide him and all that. You get 20 years for this. So, and keep it with Basil, but then once they realize that the guest is cold, he's like, oh, thank God. Thankfully, one of the characters who is staying in the hotel is a doctor. That's Dr. Price. He manages to check the body, and them trying to explain how they found him. And it's like, you did not realize this man was dead? That's so funny. Of course, he calls the coroner, and this leads to Basil and them all having to try to move the body, try to keep the other guests oblivious. Which leads into one minor thing that's interesting about this episode is that In the background, we always have Miss Tibbs and Miss Gatsby. They're other residents like the Major. But this is one of the few times that they actually play a story role in there and not just background, because one of them, I honestly don't know if it's Tibbs or Gatsby. I didn't make that note. Actually find the body and they overreact, and it's a running gag throughout the episode. It's like one of those things. It's like, man, it's funny that they overreact, but Major, maybe it's because of his slight mental deficiency, or maybe it's because of the fact he's already seen dead bodies being in war. I mean, he's a Major after all. He's also desensitized to it. Like, there's a part later in the episode where he's passing, like, another one, Fawlty. No, same one, Major. All right. It just made me laugh because of how nonchalant he is. I mean, there's other times where he's like, okay, that's because of his metal thing, but this one, it's like, hard to tell which one. The lengths that they go to try to hide this body from the guests. They put him in a laundry basket. They put him in a closet. They move him all around. The actor that played Mr. Lehman had to be very, very trusting with the actors. That'd be Derek Royal. I mean, because even though he's supposed to be playing a dead body, he's going to have to try to fight those reflexes for the scenes where they're going to have to drop him. Like, there's a scene where Manuel can't help him move the body anymore, and he lowers it. Like that one, he had to be very trusting. It's just all the physical comedy, the things I mentioned before about Basil being quick with excuses. This applies to everybody. Like Paulie actually comes up with some good excuses. Manuel, not so much. But it's just looking at him, it's like, oh, they got their work cut out for him. And this all goes into the end, where a lot of the guests are very, very put off by all the shenanigans of the day. Lehman's friends have arrived. So Basil puts it all off and says, my wife Sybil will explain everything to you. They all go over to crowd her. And he just jumps into the laundry basket. The laundry people come, take the basket away. And he gets away with Sybil calling his name. Basil! Basil, where are you? I got a big laugh out of me watching this. I actually forgot about that ending until I was rewatching it. I'm like, okay, I see where this is going. It's funny, but you know when Basil eventually came back, he probably got an earful from Sybil. Maybe a slight slap upside the head, but hey. Dr. Price does pop in a couple times, other than, confirming this man is dead and calling the coroner. Mainly because all throughout the breakfast scene, he wants his sausages, which leads to his big line in the whole episode. I'm a doctor and I want my sausages. Him getting into a little argument with Manuel over, breakfast is done. It's like, I want to sit here. Manuel trying to stick to the policy, and then Basil having to intervene. But apparently that line about the doctor and sausages is Andrew Sachs' favorite line of the series. And given how Price's actor says it, I can see why. But Price has other funny moments, like when they're trying to hide the body in the kitchen. He's like, you can't hide a body in the kitchen. Tells them to sterilize it, but he's like, except for those, I want my sausages. He really wants those sausages if he doesn't care. He ends up cooking them himself before the episode's over, only to tell them, I made my sausages and they were off. Really connects with Basil being a very, very thrifty to a fault person, to the point of being a cheapskate. That he'd rather just not throw them out, which I can kind of understand to a point if you had them frozen, but if you're in a business like this, you might want to check with them first. Which is also funny. It's like, you'll check with the Kippers and only take them when Sybil says they're fine. But with the sausages, it's like, none. Nobody will notice. Watching how the episode is itself, this next part, I am trying to picture how they would have worked this in, maybe before Basil escapes. But Cleese contemplated a joke at the end that would reveal Lehman had an identical twin brother, played by the same actor, who would show up looking for his brother. And at first everybody would freak out like, he's alive! And then once everyone realizes what's going on, Basil will be like, oh, you're Mr. Lehman's brother. We're gonna explain to you. Come on to the back of the office. Or it could have been like, all right, you need an explanation? My wife Sybil will provide it. Could have gone from there. And that whole thing right there is why Cleese and Connie Booth decided not to go with it, because explaining the death would deflate the gag. Which I kind of see, but at the same time, you could have worked it into what the episode has proper, and then try to work it through there. But I think the ending, there's enough people there. You don't need to clog it up by adding another character just randomly. The only way I think that would work is if that was actually the end gag, and Basil fainting because he thinks he's seen a ghost, and then it would be like, I was just going to ask him if my brother was here, and then just ended on that, something like that. But I could see why they decided not to do it at all. Another little thing is that Sybil at one point asks Mr. Lehman if he wants a continental or full breakfast. This is just some interesting trivia about it. A full breakfast in English hotel parlance is eggs, bacon, or sausage in toast, and a continental is coffee with pastries and fruit. So it's light versus heavy. Given how Mr. Lehman was feeling, obviously he passed away. I don't think either would be, but probably because how he was feeling, probably the continental would have been a little bit of a better choice. Although depending on how his stomach is, coffee might not want to settle well. I know when I'm really sick to where I can barely taste anything, or everything tastes metallic, I don't want to drink coffee. In conclusion, this is another fun episode. The writing is on point. You really do see where all the humor is derived from the character interactions and all the things that could go wrong trying to hide a body in a hotel. Cleese, Booth, Sachs, they're all the supporting characters. They do a great job. Prunella, she's only in a handful of scenes directly involved with it, but she's her usual self. The ending when she's shrieking Basil's name, combined with all the pictures, I always chuckle. And the whole thing about Basil being worried at the beginning and then Price interjecting, it all makes a perfect storm of comedy excellence. If I were to do like have to give my top three, I would probably put this one in there. I'd have to look at all the other ones just to decide, but this one, I remember enjoying it the first time I watched it, but I don't remember enjoying it this much. This is definitely one that upon repeat viewings I like a lot better.